Returned to West Wycombe from a most invigorating tour of all the principal countries in Europe. My travels had taken me to Italy, France, and Russia, and the splendor of those countries had left me with a desire to incorporate some of their architectural designs in our own West Wycombe house. The style of life in these foreign lands entranced me. If only our own rather solemn citizens could be as gay. Then a most welcome visit from my good friend Paul Whitehead. I had much to tell him of the sights I had seen and of my plans for improving the landscape at West Wycombe. He brought to me the delightful news that a reception would be held to honour my homecoming that very morrow, and this was to take place in the music temple recently built on the island in our own private lake. A most fitting spot for a celebration. My journeys abroad had occasioned me great pleasure, but a happier thing was to return to this gentle county of Bucks. Paul had but recently been released from the privations of the Fleet prison, where he had spent a short holiday for failing to meet a guarantee in a theatrical enterprise at Drury Lane. However, recovering from these misfortunes, he was once again in our midst, as poet, satirist, and friend. Paul's taste in the feminine virtues is well expressed in his charming verse. Ye belles, and ye flirts, and ye pert little things who trip in this frolicsome round, prithee tell me from whence this indecency springs, the senses at once to confound. What means the cocked hat and the masculine air, with each motion designed to perplex? Bright eyes were intended to languish, not stare, and softness the test of your sex. The poor weak creature whom Paul had, I believe, really for the sake of her money made his wife, was so nearly idiotic that she would call off his attention in conversation to look at a cow, not as one of a singular beauty, but in the words, "Mr. Whitehead, there's a cow." He took it most patiently, as he did all such trials of his temper, sweetened perhaps by a pretty villa and a handsome carriage, which her fortune enabled him to enjoy. I was impatient indeed to tell my friends that the name of Sir Francis Dashwood would be remembered for many a day in places as distant as Rome, Venice, and even Moscow. At St. Petersburg, where foreigners are rare, I was able, with a little scheming, to masquerade as Charles XII of Sweden, an unknown monarch in Russia. This successful hoax was most beneficial to me in acquiring the personal attentions of the Tsarina Anne. That night were in a cheerful mood. We had with us John Wilkes, Lord Mayor of London, George Selwyn, Member of Parliament, Charles Churchill, poet, and the Earl of Sandwich. now First Lord of the Admiralty. Sandwich had recently been discovered holding burlesque services in a village church, preaching blasphemous sermons to a congregation of cats, and keeping a baboon for a chaplain. At dinner, he produced the baboon and called for it to say grace. A clergyman guest remarked, "My lord, I was intending to offer grace myself, but I had no idea you had a near relative for a chaplain." Paul had not forgotten where our hoard of milk punch was secreted. I was convinced that no one could tamper with our supply of this divine tipple, as the intervening lake would deter all but the most determined. The ladies were soon to find that the properties of an island precluded any chance of premature leave-taking. And so began a splendid evening in the presence of Bacchus, Venus, and the Muse. The success of our festivities that evening put me in mind of a more permanent gathering of my friends, a form of human communion, which, by ridiculing ceremony and ritual, could bring us closer to an understanding of our earthly and spiritual lives. One of our number had elected to read some of Paul's verse. It was not too well received that evening, the company being intent on other diversions. Indeed, Paul's writings were often given a critical reception. Charles Churchill, poet of our age, wrote, "Come, method, come in all thy pride, dullness and Whitehead by thy side. Dullness and method still are one, and Whitehead is their darling son." Later, Paul had the notion that a good fright would not come amiss. Accordingly, the chimney was blocked, and the resulting turmoil proved quite hilarious. At times like these, the villagers of West Wycombe would occasionally be disturbed in their sleep by our riotous behaviour. I would then make the proper apologies and soon be forgiven. And, from time to time, I would provide entertainment for the village at the house. One such occasion consisted of the dedication of our new temple of Bacchus. The villagers were dressed in animal skins, wreathed with vine leaves and crowned with ivy. Pan, fauns, and satyrs performed a day-long ritual punctuated by discharges of cannon and bursts of acclamation from the populace. Paul wrote, "What a splendid day on Friday last! The depletion of your cellar must be vast. We each and every one did drink our fill. But sadly, Bacchus will not foot the bill." Regretfully, a most cheerful evening ended all too soon. The days that followed brought many more such joyful gatherings, and I was determined that we should exact great pleasure from them. To this end, I conceived the notion of a brotherhood, where each might do as he pleased, without earthly judgment. Thus we were formed, and I became St. Francis of the Knights of Wycombe. Every member is allowed to introduce one lady, in order to improve the general hilarity. There are other ladies present whom we were pleased to know as nuns. A fancy title, if you please. Nearby, Medmenham Abbey provided us with the seclusion we required for our devotions. Here we had only to fear divine intervention by the souls of the previous brotherhood, A somewhat more pious gathering than ours, I imagine. Paul became our steward, just content to keep the accounts and to be my friend, and I his friend. What more, indeed, is there for man? William Hogarth was our frequent guest at Medmenham, and pictured life and times most ably. It was the less fortunate citizens of this land with neither wit nor purse for such generous pleasures that took exception to our gatherings. They caused certain uproars to be directed against us, which included the dubbing of Hellfire Club upon the Knights of St. Francis of Wycombe. Sadly, the ensuing notoriety became quite unbearable. There were times when a full chapter was to be held that entrance could not readily be made to the Abbey, due in no small way to the press of spectators from London. At this time, we were in need of a new road through the village of West Wycombe, and I was determined to help the villagers obtain work. To this end, I devised a splendid scheme. Chalk for the road lay beneath West Wycombe Hill. To dig it out would provide employment for the villagers, and for our more discreet devotions would result in a magnificent cave. Inspired by the recollections of splendid architecture I had seen on my travels in Rome, Moscow, and Venice, I began work to include some of these ideas in our own West Wycombe house. The landscape improved daily. I was able to give the ancient church of St. Lawrence, which is easily seen from our estate, the most special attention. I then had the most pleasant duty to perform. My good friend Benjamin Franklin had planned to visit West Wycombe, and I was very anxious to show this man of culture our delightful surroundings. At that time, I was honoured with the position of His Majesty's Postmaster General, and so also was Ben in the colonies. On these matters we conversed at great length, also of the revision of the Book of Common Prayer, which we were both anxious to improve. Our common purpose in that endeavour was to prevent the old and faithful from freezing to death through long ceremonies in cold churches, to make the services so short as to attract the young and lively, and relieve the well-disposed from the infliction of interminable prayers. Ben's previous experience as a printer was to be of great value in this work. He pointed out to me that once, in a new edition of the Common Prayer Book, the sentence, "We shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye," became, by the omission of a single letter, "We shall all be hanged in a moment." This, to the no small surprise of the first congregation it was read to. Our new edition of the Book of Common Prayer was well received in America. Here, a certain bishop commented, "The precious pair should not interfere in religious matters." My guest's reputation as a joker had preceded him, but I was able to provide some mild amusement during our tour of the house. Ben was to write in the most kindly terms of his visit to West Wycombe. "I am in this house as much at my ease as if it were my own, and the gardens are a paradise. But a pleasanter thing is the kind countenance, the facetious and very intelligent conversation of my host, who, having been engaged for many a year in public affairs, seen all parts of Europe, and kept the best company in the world, is himself the best company existing. Also, the exquisite landscape of classical design, charmingly realized by Sir Francis at West Wycombe, whimsical and puzzling as it may sometimes be in its imagery, is as evident below the earth as above it." Ben had worked hard for the colonists in America. Indeed, he had travelled to England on their behalf. So far, his attempts to improve their lot had not met with success, but he was not easily discouraged. Affairs of state aside, Ben could write, Fair Venus calls, in beauty's arms spend night and day. The joys of love all joys excel, and loving's certainly doing well. One English gentleman retorted, "Who is this person?" An almanac maker, a quack, a chimney doctor, a soap boiler, a printer's devil, a deist, and the father of several children born out of wedlock. On the morrow, Ben would be our guest of honour at a chapter to be held in our newly found cave.
What is our command this night of our new chapter? Do what thou wilt, so be it, each man as he pleases, until the devil pleases otherwise.
Paul, as usual, had the reckoning well in hand. He was in a more solemn mood than of late. I inquired of his well-being, and he replied strangely, "I feel that I am not long for this life, but when I am gone, you'll find that part of me will remain with you forever." I told him he spoke foolishly, and would no doubt still be scratching in the book for many a year. Alas, it was not to be. Within the year he contracted a disorder such as no medicine could reach. He bore the excruciating pains which he suffered with great resignation, and departed from us on December the 30th, 1774. Paul's will made my own task singularly clear. I do hereby charge and direct my executor, hereinafter named, to raise my body to be opened, that the faculty may, if possible, discover after I am dead what they seem to be ignorant of whilst I was living, the cause of my death. And I do further order that my heart be taken out and disposed of as follows. I give to the Right Honourable Sir Francis Dashwood my heart aforesaid, together with £50, to be laid out in the purchase of a marble urn, in which I desire it may be deposited and placed in some corner of his mausoleum as a memorial of its owner's warm attachment to the noble founder, if his lordship pleases. Needless to say, the noble founder was indeed most pleased. As we made our way up the hill on that warm summer's day, my thoughts turned constantly to our long friendship together. Would Paul and I meet again in some future life, and under what conditions? A mystery indeed. It was written of him, "Here lies a man, misfortune could not bend, praised as a poet, honoured as a friend, though his youth kindled with the love of fame, within his bosom glowed a brighter flame. Whene'er his friends with sharp afflictions bled, and from the wounded deer the herd was fled, Whitehead stood forth, the healing balm applied, nor quitted their distresses till he died." Charles Churchill wrote, "May I, can worse disgrace on manhood fall, be born a Whitehead and baptized a Paul." Later, Mr. Atterbury's Oratorio, Goliath, was performed in the church. All those who gave a mite to the poor box were admitted, and a great concourse attended. During the interval, Mr. Foster executed a most charming concerto on the oboe. And so our noble order crumbled slowly into obscurity, and I had no desire to seek its revival. The years that followed brought many changes. Originality became a vice, and mediocrity a virtue. The kingdom prepared itself for the age of toil and industry. Gracious living began to decline. If our times are remembered more for their follies than achievements, then be to our failings a little kind, for England was a proud land, and the world held her in great regard. if a future age recalls my name, I trust that it will be as one who sought the love of others, and in the seeking gave it.
Perhaps you'd turn up one day, but how on earth did you manage it?
We are allowed a dispensation from time to time to return to the scenes of our earthly activities. So may I say that I'm delighted to meet the 11th holder of our title, Sir Francis Dashwood.
Well, of course, you were the second baronet, and the most famous of all our family. Are you remembered as you would wish?
History has treated me in much the same way as she does all men who lead colourful lives. One's more indiscreet moments receive great attention, while the public duties are much too dull for popular taste. I count among my own achievements the not inconsiderable contribution I made during my period as Postmaster General, and that task, you know, has not always been performed so very well.
Indeed. And of West Wycombe today, do you approve?
Oh, most certainly. My trees have grown enormously. 200 years ago, the trees and I began our lives. Today they remain, and I am but a memory. However, dull indeed to be a tree and rooted stand, sooner life than time in this fair land. One of Paul Whitehead's couplets, charming, don't you think? I'm sure if he were with us today, he would be most pleased to view this enchanting prospect once again.
And that's just how thousands of people regard it today.
I'm delighted to hear that.